Welcome, everyone, and also welcome to all the panelists. I'm really excited about our conversation today. To make sure you're in the right place, today we will be discussing Rethinking Sourcing from North America, Part 1, on June 30th. It is 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. here on the East Coast. So the question is apparel manufacturing coming home? In a recent McKinsey State of Fashion report from 2019, their recommendation was in order to meet customers' needs, apparel companies needed to focus on three things. It was nearshoring, automation, and sustainability. In a recent survey by McKinsey, 60% of the apparel procurement executives expect that over 20% of their sourcing volume will be from nearshoring by 2025. So that's 5 years away. And the main reason for this is because nearshoring allows, obviously, shorter lead times. But in conjunction with that is also automation. And I think that when people think about automation, they automatically assume robots. But that's not true. It could be automation from data analytics in stores. Automation could be being able to seamlessly shop from an app on your phone and into the store, such as when you scan a barcode. So thinking more along those lines. And then obviously, sustainability. In the same survey, 78% of sourcing managers responded that sustainability will also be somewhat or highly likely key purchasing factor by 2025. In a study conducted earlier this year by Coresight Research Report, about half of the respondents said that they either agree or strongly agree that U.S. retailers should source fewer products from China. Now, of course, this has a lot to do with the global pandemic that we've all been experiencing. About 40% of the same respondents said that they are now less willing to buy made in China products. So Coresight's, analysis is that, what does that mean for us, right? It means that U.S. retailers may need to urgently review the extent of how much they rely on China for manufacturing and what it means when you add that made in China label. So some facts about the industry real quick. According to the NCTO, from 2009 to 2019, the value of the shipments, that's man-made fiber, yarn, fabric, apparel, and sewn products, as of 2019 was $75.8 billion. And from 2009, so in the past 10 years, that's been an increase of 11%. We see some increases, some drops, but overall, that's been an 11% increase. Now, to give you an idea for comparison purposes, in China, that amount, even just the sewn apparel, was $50 billion. And for the U.S., China is the largest exporter of textiles and apparel, where they account for 38% of our nation's total imports. So while $76 billion looks impressive, it's still very small compared to what a giant like China is importing into the U.S. Also, to give an idea of what manufacturing in the U.S. is looking like, I wanted to share with you some information from OTEXA, where this is a survey just based on geographic location. So, 1 through 5 top states. So it includes North Carolina, South Carolina, California, Georgia, and New York. As you can see, I highlighted the percentages that were higher. So for yarns, 11% is in South Carolina, 16% of that is in California. So when you look across, you see that California actually has is at the top of 4 different categories, from yarn to apparel. And then also, when we're thinking about the size of these textile and apparel mills here in the U.S., where smaller companies that have 1 to 49 employees versus companies that have 500 or more employees, you can see here that the majority of the organizations are in the 1 to 49 employee range. So still very small. And I think that this is something that we are all aware, that small owned businesses make up the majority of the GDP here in the US. And this information is also available from OTEXA. And so with that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of where the state of our industry is. And I wanted to introduce the panelists that will be joining us on this virtual discussion in alphabetical order by company. We have Aylin Beyce from Amour, Vert, which literally means green love in French. We have David Sasso from Buhler Yarns out in Georgia. We have Diviya Loomba from EAGLEFABRICS and Cassia Lewis from Swisstex Direct. Thank you so much for joining us, panelists. And now we'll allow each one to talk to us a little bit about their organization. You can go first.
Hi, my name is Aylin Beyce. I'm the design director at Amour Vert. Amour Vert is a sustainable women's wear brand that is based out of San Francisco. And we are committed to sustainability. We only source sustainable fabrics, and we make all of our products except for sweaters in the United States.
And now David from Buhler.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, I got the right icon color. I'm David Sasso with Buhler Yarns. I'm in Jefferson, Georgia, which is about 1 hour northeast of Atlanta. We're a small spinner of about equivalent of 30,000 spindles. Most people know us because of Modal, Tencel, and Supima yarns. We're the finest count yarn spinner in the United States. We started out in woven sheet fabrics and migrated to the knit fabrics when China entered WTO. So as a spinner, we felt the impact of China very, very seriously. In 2017, we were purchased by Samil Spinning out of South Korea. And ever since then, we've been diversifying our product line. We added synthetic fibers, technical fibers to our product line. And we're doing everything from technical fabrics, FR fabrics, apparel, fashion, and home furnishing. So we're pretty diverse as the pictures that that I posted on this site. So the theme for us is, if you're going to be small, be versatile, fast, and good quality. So hopefully that is what will carry us on into the future, and but there's more to change as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And then next we have EAGLEFABRICS. Diviya?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diviya Loomba. I'm Vice President of EAGLEFABRICS. We're a fabric manufacturer here in Los Angeles that specializes in knitting, dyeing, finishing, and printing knit fabrics for apparel. We've been established since 1988, and for over 20 years, we've been a pioneer when it comes to developing innovative fabrics, especially with our extensive collection that uses environmentally friendly fibers, such as Tencel Lyocell, Tencel Modal, and many more. And I'm the second generation leader of EAGLEFABRICS, and me personally, I strive to put sustainability at the forefront of our business, and am passionate in informing designers and founders on how it's possible to build their brand with USA manufacturing.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, thanks. There we go. This is a breakdown of majority of our business, as you can see here, is we use sustainable fibers. We also do some other ones that are GOTS certified organic cotton, recycled viscose, and then we also do conventional fibers and synthetics as well. We also are, in order to expand our flexibility in terms of lower minimums as well as quick turnaround times, is we stock over 2 million pounds of various yarns here in our Los Angeles warehouse. So that way designers and brands have access to materials at a faster rate, and we don't necessarily need to be sourcing overseas and waiting for long lead times to get yarns. And that way we can pretty much turn things around within about 4 weeks. And we do single knits, double knits, novelties, yarn dyed stripes, pretty much the whole gamut. And we specialize primarily in customization. So I think a lot of brands come to us when they want to make a signature product that can help make their brand unique.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Diviya. And then next we have Swisstex Direct, Cassia.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me and for featuring Swisstex. We're excited to be a part of the panel. So I'm Cassia Lewis. I'm the Director of Business Development, overseeing product development and marketing for Swisstex Direct, as well as in charge of some of our sales accounts. So for Swisstex, we're mostly, we want you to remember, we're smart, sustainable sourcing. We're a very, very proud circular knit manufacturer with locations in Los Angeles as well as El Salvador, with dyeing and finishing available in Los Angeles and knit, dye, and finish in El Salvador. For us, some key pillars for us really kind of are that sustainability factor. We see it's so important to our brands and to the consumer, and it's really a pillar that we're built on because of our leadership. We've got some state-of-the-art automated equipment, so I know, Sharon, you pointed to automation, so we'll be happy to touch on that and the investment that we've made in our dye and finish equipment. We were the first Blue Sign certified manufacturer in the United States, and Blue Sign has called us out as one of the most sustainable dye houses on the planet, so we're really proud of that. We have a very broad fabric library, pretty much anything underneath the circular manufacturing, circular knit manufacturing umbrella. And yeah, we're just excited to be here and be a part of the discussion today.
I have one more slide for you. I don't know if there was
anything
here.
Yeah, so this is featuring our Swisstex California, of course, is our Los Angeles operation. We've been in business there for over 20 years, and Swisstex El Salvador coming up on 14 years in El Salvador. So a little bit about our capability there, and then kind of that call out for Blue Sign. We are Blue Sign in both of our facilities, so we're again very proud of that sustainability factor.
Great, thank you. And I didn't add a slide for Lenzing. So this webinar or virtual discussion has been organized by Tencel, which are branded fibers made by Lenzing. Lenzing is a leader in sustainable wood-based cellulose fibers. So we are the manufacturers of Tencel Lyocell, Tencel Modal, Lenzing Ecovero, and Refibra. So you might have seen some of our panelists here reference some of those brands. And so if you have any questions specifically about our fibers at the end, or even for any of the panelists at the end, I will be sharing contact information as well. So thank you. Now we can jump right into the discussion. Now, there was a McKinsey report which came out very recently on how the pandemic will accelerate supply chain's much needed makeover. I know David and we've discussed several times about what are all the issues that are current in our industry. And I even had conversations with Aylin on how so many of the manufacturing capabilities in this country, as soon as the pandemic hit and it was necessary that we realized there's a shortage in PPE materials, how the industry quickly pivoted to manufacture masks and scrubs and anything that was needed by the hospitals quickly to make it together. And there was a lot of partnership and a lot of collaboration. And I feel like what's been very hopeful and what's been great to see in this instance is that we know we can do it. We know that it's possible if we all collaborate and set our mind that we want to nearshore and source locally, that it is possible, because we did it. We did it during the early days of the global pandemic. And I wanted to add here a quote by Katie George from McKinsey, where she mentions that this was happening, already before COVID, but COVID really brought to light with the crunch that we had with the that PPE wasn't as easily accessible. We had to quickly make it. And so one question that I wanted to ask all of you panelists is, can you share one key takeaway from your PPE manufacturing experience?
I can chime in on that. So I'm Diviya from EagleFabrics. So for us, onset of COVID, I mean, it's really been, the past few months have been a whirlwind for us, because we started in the end of March where we temporarily pivoted some of our manufacturing to produce reusable masks. And we had thousands of yards of fabric in stock. We knew that there was a huge shortage of mask supply, so we had to do something about it. And we then quickly partnered with some contractors. We produced tens of thousands of masks and partnered with our local city officials to help with distribution. And we were able to move at a quick speed, get masks into the hands of people who needed it. And this ability to have access to raw material and pivot production so quickly based on demand is what I think makes USA manufacturing so beneficial. And this ideology can actually really apply to the retail sector too, because over the next coming months and years, I think we're going to start seeing more and more buying power coming through e-commerce business, where flexibility is going to be needed on the manufacturing side and throughout the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. Did anybody else have any experience that they wanted to share with the listeners? Oh.
I will chime in after Diviya, because we were in a very similar situation, reacting in a very similar way. For us, I think the government procurement business was new. We were traditionally more lifestyle apparel and performance apparel. And so this situation kind of brought all the great minds of textiles together. It's been really rewarding, I think, for our industry to see the collaboration. And to me, that was one of the key things we've seen that's been positive come out of this circumstance is industry coming together, from our resources that are helping us with domestic textiles pushing in Washington, to just seeing supply chain come together and support one another, even competitors, and trying to lean on each other during this time period. So that collaboration, I don't know, has been inspiring for me. So that kind of the positive thing that we've seen that's been key for our industry out of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true. I don't know. I think Aylin wanted to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I mean, we made masks for Amour, and we were really easily able to use some dead stock fabrics we had. We just had small yardages, and we would have never been able to make garments out of them. But just send it to LA and have masks made up really quickly. But another thing, I mean, that is great, but I think it's the collaboration that's the real takeaway, because to be sustainable, we need to be collaborative. And this moment, although it's been very painful, has really shown me that we can totally disrupt our supply chain. It's possible. We've seen it, and we need to just keep going and build on that. And I think even on a bigger challenge, so we're doing this, how do we all help each other become more sustainable? How do we all come together to say, we make product, how do we become circular? How do we collect all those masks that have been used and make something new? So I truly believe that we could even push it to a higher level.
Oh, wow, that's great. I wasn't even thinking about what to do. I mean, I think we all see all of the excess, but it's true. What is that next?
We can do it. We can figure it out. I know that, especially if it's here, it's infrastructure. And I think that, yeah, it's all possible, and we're not allowed to say anymore that it's not, because we've seen what we can do. So.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And with that, what would you guys say is a very common misconception about sourcing from North America?
I'll go first on that one, because my yarns are the highest priced yarns in the United States, right? So I always get the question, or when I ask the question, why don't you source more of some of the products that we make? And the first thing is that you're too expensive. And when you ask the question, then by what does that mean I'm too expensive? And the first thing is, well, you're a U.S. manufacturer, and the fibers you use is expensive, so therefore I can't afford you. So when we started getting down to the math of things, it turned out she was completely wrong. And that's a misconception, because if we're losing business because we don't know our math, we have to re-educate the industry. This is one of the things that I go out there pounding. Let me sit down with you and let's look at the math. And But there are other factors other than just price, and I think we can get that in other questions down the road.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to chime in on a common misconception?
Yeah, I agree that's a misconception. And I know that, like, I mean, especially with the tariffs, like, that the yarns are more expensive here, just like isn't true. And then just the level of like shipping and, you know, all of those costs that you have to take into account. And then just if you look at costs as far as sustainability is concerned, like, I think everyone just needs to shift that, like, you want to buy something that is a better quality and buy less of it, obviously. And that you're able to, when you buy U.S. yarns, you can see where it's from. You're not like depending on some like certification that may or may not be true from somewhere. Like, you can really make sure and like trace and see for yourself where things are made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an excellent point that you brought up about tariff costs. I changed the slide on there where a Gartner survey of 260 global supply chain leaders in February and March for this year found that 33% of them had either moved sourcing and manufacturing out of China or plan to do so in the next 2 to 3 years. And the primary reasons for that, tariff and resiliency, which goes back to what you were mentioning, Aylin, that, you know, the tariff costs are huge. And that's one, I think, misconception when people think, oh, yarns here are too expensive, but then you look at the tariff costs, right? If they've increased 10% because of all this trade war that the US and China have been having for the past 2 years. In addition, we know labor costs have gone up. You know, I was looking at some data on that, and a couple of years ago, it was like 1/10, and now it's 1/3. It's the Chinese, the minimum pay has gone up, which is great, you know, because I think people should get paid the right wages, but then that's no longer a reason to say I'm going to source from that country. So excellent point. Now, with the mindset of what's a misconception, if we're more realistic, what do you guys think is an obstacle about sourcing from the North American supply chain?
I'll jump in for that one because it kind of piggybacks on what we were just talking about. For us, I think one of the biggest obstacles is price, but for us, it's the comparison of FOB pricing versus the pricing that we carry that is with NAFTA and CAFTA trade agreements. So for us, I think it's educating and working with the supply chain to kind of help them with those garment calculations to share the FOB difference and making sure that we can align a little bit more at an even playing field, taking into account the duties that wouldn't be included. And then the second portion of that for us is there's really a lack of organic developments here in the region. We do a lot of counter sourcing and a lot of requests of programs that are moving over that have been already predetermined, and we're trying to match something that already exists in the marketplace because they've decided to change the source location. But in general, having those organic developments that originate here in the U.S. is fairly limited. So that would be kind of our biggest challenge, is really working and collaborating with our brands and our designers to start and initiate developments here locally.
Yeah, that's really great. You're right on how, you know, it's not really an apples to apples comparison just by changing the region.
I just wanted to add in.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Is that to what Cassia was mentioning, is that I think that brands need to also look at the big picture. It's not just about the apples to apples, like fabric to fabric, and counter sourcing is a common problem that we face too. But it's the big picture of how do you tweak certain things to help ensure that your margin is still there. Maybe it's little small tweaks in garments, but it's really going back to the drawing board and seeing that, you know, maybe I'm going to have to sacrifice this, but I can compromise on this, and my big picture, my costing is still the same. And I think one flexibility that U.S. manufacturing can help with is with lower minimums or accommodating to that flexibility on lower minimums, you're going to have less inventory of fabric, which actually will inhibit cash flow. So the brand can actually grow faster by not having to be sitting with so much liability. And then you're also supporting slow fashion simultaneously. So it really is a domino effect in each category. And I think that comes with having to spend some time with design teams and production teams and reassessing, okay, what can we do here that's a little bit different than what we were doing before? Because it's not going to be an apples to apples if you're looking at one fabric and another fabric side by side. But the big picture, that I think is a big misconception that we have to really take effort in educating our customers on.
Right.
I think you just need to be more creative. Like designers, I mean, I'm a designer. You just become more creative. You know, you're like, oh, I can't get that. That's what you have to do with sustainable yarns anyways. Like, okay, just like think outside of this thing you found that you love. Like, what can you create that's also beautiful within these constraints, like where you are? And I think we've gotten lazy, and like that's something we just need to change. And it's fun.
Mm-hmm. Right. You know, I think a lot of that too ties back to this crazy schedules where you have to meet all the deadlines to, you know, launch a specific line. And then it goes back to your point of view about slow fashion. Like maybe we need to think more about seasonless, especially like in a place like California. You know, you don't need to have, you know, all of, you know, clothes for all these different seasons. Maybe how do you take one product and are able to wear it for different seasons and different times of the year? So what is one thing that you guys would like to see or would recommend to anybody who's listening in on when we've discussed these obstacles and these challenges? What is one thing that we could all do quickly to remove these obstacles? I think you guys might have hit on it a little bit, like maybe think more creatively. You know, let's step back and see what we're trying to accomplish and not try to replicate the exact same thing. What are some of the other things that you guys think we could do to help remove some of these obstacles?
I mean, I think that there was a lot of great points summarized, like, okay, creative design point of view, just like being more creative and not so like attached to your original idea, and like just be open to what you can make, which can be incredible. Mm-hmm. I do think if we had more machinery in the US, that would be great. Like, because the talent of like the I work with you guys, like with these textile mills, the talent at the textile mills is incredible here. So it's like just there's some machinery. I think we need to have some more machinery here, which is a totally solvable obstacle. And then I think educating the customers on cost, because there is this conception of like, it's too expensive, we can't even look at this, which is not always true. So I think those are three things I see.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the education is huge, but I think we try to source things here does not need to be sourced here. Understanding what can be sourced effectively. The idea is to sell your garments at first price, not at the 50, 60, 75% discount. This means understanding what are the risks of your garment. Simple things like as soon as you put a color on a garment that has a time value, understanding what that time value is, a lot of people, it goes over their head. And I think we need to understand how to play a role in that speed, because it's not all about price. And I sent the link, and maybe Sharon, you can send those links to the participants, have them available. But we need to think how to source this hemisphere. And you mentioned, Aylin, machines. Machines don't get invested until I'm assured that I have a payback. If the retailers are intent to source elsewhere, I will not invest in machines. So this is a give and take thing. It's a catch-22. I think technology will shorten the cost differential between us and them, but I think speed trumps price or cost. And understanding that formula makes a huge difference.
Interesting. No, you're absolutely right. It is a catch-22. It would be great to be able to say we can have all the same machinery and the same skill level and all of that, but you're right. A lot of times, you know, if the investment is made, but then the orders don't come, then you sit there with all of this equipment and all of this capital investment that you've made.
Yeah.
But I mean, but yeah, so it's like, how do we figure that out? I don't have any answers. That's what I'm hoping we're able to talk through some of that here.
Yeah, I have I guess with both and Aylin and David on that, is that, well, you could also work into cost sharing between a brand and a mill, because I think that over time, if a brand, and that comes with taking risk, which a lot of brands I think sometimes are hesitant to do, but it's about the brand researching their demographic and their customers and looking at their own data, seeing what do their customers really value. And then if a brand is willing to share into those costs of machinery, and so is the mill, then I think that it's one step closer to moving forward on new developments and more access. I think by sharing those costs too, then you don't necessarily, you can actually go into it where, let's say, okay, I have a 5-year plan with this particular machine and this potential capacity and this potential volume. And machines don't also necessarily just make one thing, because I think keeping in mind about that flexibility of what machines can make, and planning in advance. And that's same for yarns. I think that like a brand can invest in making their own yarn, and let's say they're not going to use a full container in a month and they just don't have that capacity, but it's something that they truly believe in on the yarn stage and in the most rawest material, then it's the mill's job, it's my job to say, okay, well, this yarn can be used to make A, B, C, D, E, F, G things, and so you have a lot more versatility there. But that investment has been made and that risk has been taken on both ends at that point. And I think if it doesn't have to necessarily be used right away, and especially with machinery and yarns, I think there is a lot more, the pathway is open up in terms of what kind of products that you can use. So I think cost sharing is something to consider when it comes to
I think that's a really cool idea, cost sharing, and like, I mean, I believe that makes so much sense. And even it could be between brands and, you know, like, because I think with this whole being sustainable, we need to take away like competition as a fear and just we're all going to build our beautiful things. And if we do that, like the benefit of not having a ton of machinery here and a huge infrastructure left is we could rebuild it sustainably.
Right.
So, which a lot of people can't do because you're like, we already have this, but if there's nothing or if there's not enough of a certain kind of machinery or certain things, we can all partner to make like something really, really like, you know, make circular, or, you know, we could figure something out that's more about innovation as well.
I think, too, in this entire circumstance, we've seen transparency be a key thing that has surfaced just in general across the entire supply chain. And for me, I think, especially with the brands that we're working with through this circumstance, they have opened up a little bit more, been more transparent, been more communicative, because that's what we have to do to survive this time together. So I think to just piggyback on all three of you, exactly what you said in terms of the, you know, items of cost, and that being kind of where everybody is suffering right now. You know, most of the supply chain has been closed for the last 3 months, at least here domestically and around different states in this phased reopening process. So it's been extremely challenging with cash flow. So I feel like, you know, the openness and transparency we have with not just the brands, but all the way down to the yarn level, the entire supply chain, this circumstance woke us up a little bit to the importance of that.
Yeah, thank you. I see that we got one question. It says, okay, China is excluded and North America supply is costly. Alternatively, which are the countries you'll prefer for mass sourcing of textiles?
Well, bias-wise, I'm going to tell you El Salvador, come source with us. There actually is an extremely strong supply chain in Central America. So we do have next door neighbors that can still execute that same type of speed to market that you find in North America. That market is also growing, but I think the intention of this conversation is around North America. But if you have any questions on Central America sourcing, let me know, and I will be happy to answer those questions and point you to some good partners in that area.
Right. But you go ahead, David.
Yeah, let me try to answer the question. if you source effectively, you source what's got low risk, right? If you're talking about huge volumes, I think if you take all of Asia's production and you just take 5% and move it to Latin America, you're already booked up, right? So you're going to need those big, massive manufacturers somewhere in the world that can handle the U.S. consumer. But I also think that the U.S. consumer will not consume as much going forward. I think we're watching our pennies. We're watching our sustainability stance and so forth. Being a Korean-owned company, I understand that Asia is extremely struggling with volumes. You know, they're asking us, how come you don't get the volumes? You don't have volumes in this hemisphere. We react. We chase. That's what we're good at. So you can have those huge manufacturers anywhere in the world because they don't like making changes. You start making changes in Asia, they're going to say, well, our cost is going to go up. Duh. What do you think the cost is high for, right? So understanding that I want to increase my profitability by selling at first price, this hemisphere needs to be your number one look for that. But if you're going to say, I'm going to buy a white T-shirt at the cheapest price because it has little risk, go to Asia. That's where you'll find it. So this is part of the frustration is that we're asked to meet certain price points in this hemisphere that the garment has no risk. Why in the world are you sourcing this here? So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I love that example of the white T-shirt or the white shirt with the red stripe. That has a higher risk.
Say one thing about that too, which is I think that the way I look at it is that like there's a sustainability aspect. So you want to like source near where you make, and we make in the USA. Like there's a lot of different aspects that I'll always see through a sustainability lens. But I do think it's interesting to look at like the historic strengths of different places, like China and silk. Like they have been making silk. They excel at silk. So I don't feel like I would want to necessarily even develop that somewhere else. But I think, and like with wool, like, okay, I would love to we source wool from like New Zealand, from Australia, and from sometimes from Peru. And so like that makes sense because those are where the yarns come from, right? So I think that there's some things with yarns that just make sense from a sustainability point of view, and also just from like a cultural heritage point of view. But honestly, all of my knits are from the USA, and I don't feel like if I counter source them, they would be any cheaper. I think it's just being clever.
We have another question here. Says, for PPE, there has been a lot of transparency because there is high demand and less consideration for cost or competition. How do you foster the same dynamic for other products? And that was exactly what we were talking about earlier on. And thank you for your question. Yes. How, if we know that there was the cost did not matter, there was less consideration for that, and competition because you can get a mask from everyone now. Absolutely right. How do we continue that moving forward for our other lines? Any ideas?
I think so in regards to the PPE, yes, everyone is making a mask now, and you're going to have two sets of consumers, really. You're going to have the ones that are really price conscious because one is truly they didn't factor this into their budget and they just don't have the spend to be providing it. We get a lot. I have tons of inquiries coming in from schools, for example, who just can't afford the extra budget for it. And so they're very price conscious. But there are ways, and that becomes, like, once again, through transparency, through communication, is so maybe the existing pattern that we have uses slightly more fabric and the yield for it is higher, but they have a certain cost that they need to be within. I think it's important for brands and customers to be transparent about what is their expectation on cost, because one thing with manufacturing in the US is that we have the ability to re-engineer things quickly. So if someone says to me that, I need to be 50 cents less on this mask, then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I change the pattern a little bit so it has less consumption. Maybe I add a different ear loop or something to that sort. And I think that translates into garments, because with garments, if I have a customer who's saying, I need to make a sweatshirt no more than $25 or something, and my cost of fabric has to be less than $4.50, then I'm like, then I go back to the drawing board. Let's talk about the yarns. Let's talk about, what's the weight need to be? Maybe we need to go down about an ounce instead of half an ounce. Do you have that flexibility there? Because in that way, I'm costing it based off of meeting the needs of my customer. So I think that goes back to what Cassie was saying too about transparency, is that if we all work together on what are your needs and what are the possibilities, we're going to find that happy medium. It's just about being transparent. But from jumping from one, I think the loyalty is a little bit not as strong as we'd had hoped. Is where, I think there's that tendency to jump from, if I don't see or hear in an email about the price that I'm looking for, I'm going to jump and find something else, and maybe I'll just go back to doing overseas production. But I think there is some time and effort that needs to be taken also on the buyer's side to say that, this is what I'm really looking for. Do you think you can help me with that?
Yeah. David, I see there was a question here for you. Let me see, I had it right in front of me. David, even if we can run smaller volumes in the US or LATAM, how to better manage the minimums needed for both fabric and garment production? And I think you responded.
Visibility. Yeah, let me explain. To be flexible, agile, speed. Imagine that, and Linda is with Under Armour. Imagine that our network here, we have forged a supply chain partnership with EAGLEFABRICS and Swisstex and Under Armour, and I'm the spinner. She gets to see our inventory. She sees what we have, and we can dedicate certain inventories to her to react quicker. But that means she has to tell us, all right, I'm going to be needing these type of fabrics somewhere within the next 3 to 4 or 6 months. And from a yarn standpoint, 3 yarns make 70% of all fabrics, right? Understanding how to utilize yarns and calculating, well, these are the fabric weights that I want. These are knit structures that I want. We can do a lot of creative or effective predictions and what we feel comfortable in inventory. And that's the speed. When I brought this idea to a guy that's actually wrote software a long time ago, he says, oh yeah, the network used to communicate back and forth, up and down, from yarns up to garments. Nobody has visibility on any yarn unless I give it to them. Well, I'll give it to you if we make a certification, a promise, a partnership. So these are the things that you work with in terms of minimums. The other thing that drives me a little bit bonkers is that what makes my minimum higher than others? This is the mystery for a lot of people. Why can't Buhler offer me 500 pounds of this particular yarn? Please come in and let me show you what are the obstacles for me to do 500 pounds of yarn. Right? So we really need to take a deep dive in every individual company that you want to partner with and set an alliance so that speed does happen. Visibility.
To piggyback off of David and kind of speak to the fabric production side, for us, this has been certainly disruptive, and we foresee that the typical mill low-cost model is not going to proceed forward, and it's going to have to be a demand-based production model to meet those lower MOQs for both garment and fabric. So for us, what does that mean for us? For us, that means a loss of efficiency. If we can't do big runs, it means more frequent stop of the equipment. It means smaller runs in a lot of ways that are below our MOQs create color consistency problems. So for us, we've been actually digging and diving into this because we're seeing this as a demand across all the brands that we service. And so for us, we've kind of developed, we're working on developing a model to offer lower stock programs or lower stock increments that are available, but with that shorter cycle, that shorter development and production, and that leaner inventory strategy. But it's again with that visibility that David was just talking about from the brand. And so we're working with the brands to get insight into forecasts all the way down to the T3 yarn level. And that to me, that collaboration is how we're going to make it through this. I know I keep saying collaboration, but really that has been the key thing for us in working through this. And I think it will be key in us moving forward to address how the market's going to react, because we know we're going to see that in the decrease of demand.
And with that decrease in demand too, I think, so similar to us, we actually started seeing this shift about 5 years ago when e-commerce was picking up. So for us, we repositioned where we created collections on our most popular fabrics that we saw were just constantly being produced. And we internally took the risk on buying yarn minimums that, so like David is suggesting, is that we know that 500 pounds is really difficult to make, but that's also then an onus on us that, well, we want to support yarn mills and then our customers want to support us. So if everyone is supporting each other, then that impact is there. Because so we take the risk in investing in the yarn, we stock the yarn locally, and then we also will take the risk in producing extra yardage and keeping it in stock in, let's say, our top 10 styles that we have. So we not only are able to service small businesses who are, working from home and trying to build a brand from, the ground up, as well as to even big brands who are wanting to do capsule collections on things, or they want to, not spend in doing 1,000 yards on something, but they just need 200, 300 yards to make by, then we're able to service the entire gamut then. And I think that model has actually then, while we were trying to help e-commerce businesses starting 5 years ago, it's actually now been supporting big brands more than we had anticipated. Because I think they're also seeing is that, well, if I don't have enough units to fulfill doing 1,000 yards, I just can't do it. I need my 500. And so then we give them the options then. And then that goes back to the brand to go back and say, okay, well, how do I redesign my products to work within designing into a fabric versus the other way around? I think most brands are, the designers and brands are usually taught to create a line sheet and have this beautiful vision in their mind, and then it's really tough for designers with their creativity to say, oh, well, I no longer can fulfill that vision. But there is, like Aylin said, is that it's about being open and changing kind of that vision. And if you design into fabrics that already exist or are in stock, then you actually are supporting the entire supply chain down to raw material to yarn. So the impact is there, and then you're having slow fashion being resolved on its own because you're not making more than, we have hundreds of thousands of yards of fabric in stock, but I find it hard to sell stock fabric sometimes because someone has this idea that they're looking for and they don't necessarily want to recreate their garment to design into the fabric that already exists. So it's actually creating more, producing more, capacity is more. It's this, evolving cycle. But I think if there is some readjusting to designing into what exists, and the entire supply chain can take certain risks in investing, like in where we buy yarn in advance, then I think it's possible. I think it's possible to service smaller customers as demand changes.
Right. You bring up a really good point. It was a question that I had, and I really liked how you said you first started working in this model to help supply smaller brands, but in fact, that model also works for larger brands as they're looking to carry less inventory and thinking about how they meet their sustainability goals and strategies and have less yardage in stock, more inventory on the floor. Yeah. I wanted to ask each one of you, during the pandemic, what are some changes that has forced, what have been some things that have forced you to make changes during this time to rethink your business?
I can go. So for us, when the pandemic hit, it was like when we design our occasion. So it was basically March, April, May is when we're like, dresses for weddings, dresses for graduation, dresses for Easter. And, it was, luckily we are very close to calendar, so we were able to just keep some fabrics and not make all of the garments. But, that was like pretty much as far as like seasonality is concerned, really a difficult time. And so for June and July and August, what we did is we're doing mostly dead stock capsules based on fabric that we already had in stock. We did embroideries, on garments we already had, just as a way of like taking a step back and getting through, anything we have left. And it was, again, it kind of goes to what Diviya is saying, but it's being very creative with the limitation and saying, you know what, I can make something beautiful out of this. And it's not the exact idea I had previously for summer, but it turned out really well. So I think designers need to like be more open and realize there's a creativity there and that you need to support your partners. That's the way we can really make this all happen. And definitely for fall, we are always quite thoughtful with what we design, and we do small batch, but even more thought goes into things. And we only use certain yarns because we only use sustainable yarns. So we're used to working within the restrictions of like, not having a lot. And luckily for us, we have like a great supply base here.
You mentioned sustainable yarn. Somebody asked to address a question that you had. It's for you, Aylin, on how do we all produce more sustainable garments? How do we become circular? Do you know of a database out there that contains all sustainable yarns, fabrics, etc.?
I wish.
You have to do the work. You have to do
you
the
do. I mean, I'm happy to share. My team and I Amour Vert has worked very hard on building something that is like our sustainable yarns, like our, like all of our, regenerated cellulose fibers are from Lenzing, because we know that you source from FSC certified forests. And, we have a list of what we do and why. And we know that like sustainability is the most environmental damage happens in the fiber form and in the fabric form. So really picking your yarns and how they're dyed and made is like a huge, huge impact. And then as far as where things are produced, we produce in USA, and we believe in that. But, you can also, there are great certifications just to make sure that there's fair labor. And for circularity, I mean, I think it's all about partnerships. And it's like, this is possible. It is totally possible. But all the like big brands and small brands and mills just need to like, and consumers need to decide that it's a priority.
Right.
Totally possible.
Right. Oh, I totally agree, because, that's why, you're making it possible. And there are a lot of other brands that are great examples of doing it possible or making it possible. In fact, to the question about, is there like a directory? So at Lenzing, even though we make fiber, we still provide resource lists of different fabric suppliers and different yarn suppliers. And in our resource list, our mill partners and David from Buhler, they're listed on there, and many others, and we have it by region, because again, while we're a fiber manufacturer, we do believe in also supporting at every stage from the yarn, fabric, garment, and consumer to provide that information. Now, of course, ours obviously has our fibers in it, and also blends, but, always happy to share this resource list. But also, I do believe that everybody has to do their own research. Why do you pick maybe organic cotton or recycled cotton? Like, that's up to, I think, every designer and every brand to take that stand, or Supima cotton, for example, like at Buhler. So we do have that information, but there's also, you still need to do some research and some work. And then now I see, sure, go right ahead.
Sharon, just to add on to that, and your fabric mills are a great resource, actually.
Yeah.
So for me, when I'm working with a new client, or even when it's an existing client and they're trying to develop something new, my first question is, what's the use case? Is it for, just to give you an example, that like Lenzing Modal is a fantastic fiber. It's so soft. You want to live in it. But sometimes when it's by itself, it's primarily very drapey. And if you're making a men's t-shirt versus a women's t-shirt, that's something that I can help guide on, because at that point I'm going to tell you that most men don't want to really drape your shoes. So at that point it's something to consider, that maybe you should be looking into, Lenzing modal blended with cotton, or blended micro modal blended with Supima. And it's about having those conversations about what's that end customer of yours really looking for, and how do you design around that, and thinking about the need of your end customer and then working backwards. Because you at the end of the day, everyone wants to be really successful in selling product, and you want to not just sell something to sell something. It should be done with thought and done with care. And I think that when you're really thinking about who is going to be buying the product, that's when you think differently, because you're putting yourself into their shoes. And that's how you assess which eco fiber to use. That's how you assess whether to garment dye versus piece dye. That's how you assess whether you're going to be doing certain washes on it or not, based off of the effects of that wash's impact on the environment. Is it aesthetic versus functionality? A lot of questions, and that's part of the design process when selecting fabrics, that, when we work with customers, we really want to create that customer service level that is not just about, giving them a product, but making sure that it's something that they can use season after season and is timeless.
Right. You're absolutely right. And here we are to our last minute. The hour went by really fast. I'd love to get each one of you to answer my last question is if there was one thing that the listeners today could take away, what would you like that to be?
Well, I guess I'll go first I kept saying it, so collaboration and joining together in this time period. I think sustainability for the dual fold purpose of that word, so sustainable in the sense of how can we last longer, and how can we survive and push forward and see a different future for the textile supply chain, and being collaborative in those efforts, but also sustainable in the sense of, what can we be doing? Like Aylin said, how can we be thinking about the limitations that we have currently in this region, and being creative of how to work with what we have. My mom always says, use what you got, so use what you got kind of thing. But yeah, just to have that mentality of coming together and working on the supply chain and producing something better for our future, but with that sustainable mindset in mind.
I'd like to say entire education of the supply chain is what we have to continue to strive for. As a spinner and all the things that I've been involved, when you make a specialty yarn, you get involved in everything. But I can tell you, we make a lot of really weird decisions based on whether it's price or fiber or so forth. Sustainability is from A to Z. It's not just the yarn, it's not just the fiber. And one of the things that I love is contributing to the supply chain on what is a good idea. And I'd love to hear more. The ideas can come from anywhere. But I love those questions, and I love the interaction, because I love making great garments.
For me, I'm going to say transparency, I think, is my takeaway, is that I think it's transparency across the supply chain. What are my needs? What are your needs? And how do we meet in the middle? And it's about building a relationship and working together. And I think that's where you really can come up with something fantastic. And I think one thing that USA manufacturing does is that it is about relationships. It's not just about producing products, but it's about building a brand and building partnerships together.
Thank you.
And I think all the things you said, that's like exactly what I feel. And I think I just want to say that I feel like we should just dream big, and like we're already doing so much, more than a lot of people and a lot of companies, as far as like how we're thinking about like making yarns and making products. But it is an exciting thought about like what the collaboration could mean if we just, if the industry in the U.S. just meets once in a while and just like we talk about ideas and think about what if we could be like a hub of circular sustainable manufacturing in the U.S. Like there's like incredible potential.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you. So we got collaboration, education, transparency and a think tank hub for all the industry. I love that. Thank you so much to each one of you for joining in on this virtual discussion. I really have a lot of takeaways, and I hope that our listeners did as well. I wanted to end with this quote by Steve Jobs. If you are working on something that you really care about, you don't have to be pushed. The vision pulls you. And I get that sense from each one of you. So this is a really great hour. And for our listeners or the people that logged in, these are, if you have questions, please feel free to address them. As you heard from all the panelists, they love the questions, especially David. Ask him tons of questions. He loves the challenge. He likes making great garments. So thank you so much to everybody. I will be sending out a special promo code from Amour. Thank you, Aylin, for organizing that. To people can shop sustainable garments made in the U.S. with a discount code. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.